see, my wife had just moved into a new neighborhood and we didn't know anybody there. Thankfully, through our children, we were able to meet some cool couples that we could hang out with. One of those couples, let's call them Larry and Pam, was especially cool to us. We had a lot of the same interests, and they lived this sort of jet-setting lifestyle even though they had kids. It was something that my wife and I thought was impossible before we met them. The four of us hit it off, and we spent a lot of time together. It helped that our children were close too. It worked out very well when we wanted to go out and have double dates. We could travel, and we had them to talk to about things going on with our kids. After a few months of knowing them, I started to notice that Larry was a little flirty. I joked about it one time when he was flirting with my wife, just telling him to back off because she's taken. Pam shrugged her shoulders and assured me that he was just a flirt and didn't mean anything by it. I was confident in my relationship, and I wasn't worried about a little flirting. I've always been under the impression that it was harmless as long as it didn't evolve into anything else. But the flirting continued. It happened often enough that I was starting to get a little uncomfortable with it. My wife was gorgeous. This isn't saying that Pam wasn't, but Larry would have been crazy not to want my wife, but I wasn't sure if he was respecting our boundaries. Pam and Larry sent their kids to a summer camp every year, and they were able to convince my wife and I to send our kids to the same one. The idea behind it was if the kids were all away for 2 weeks, we could take a grown-up vacation without them. It honestly sounded great. Ife and I were looking forward to going away with them. We thought that it would be a great opportunity to take time for ourselves and almost have a second honeymoon of sorts. In the weeks leading up to our departure, my wife had been growing a little bit distant. I kind of chalked it up to thinking that she was going to miss our kids while we were gone. 2 weeks away from them was more than we'd ever spend apart, and I knew it would be hard for her. But I noticed that she was making secret phone calls and texting people very privately. I was a little curious about what was happening, but till a sexual people, the day of the departure came and we joined Pam and Larry at a vacation rental. We all went on together. It was right on the beach. There was a jacuzzi tub on the porch. There was a large smoker grill, and we had high-end luxurious accommodations. It was heavenly. The first night that we were there, we bought some beer and wine, and we all sat outside after I manned the grill and got a little drunk. I noticed that my wife and Larry were once again very flirty. Actions today. I was in high spirits, so I once again laughed it off. I went to bed, and when I woke up the next morning, my wife was not there. When I got up and moved around the house, I saw that she was out by the water in her bathing suit and going for a swim. That would have been fine had Larry not been there with her. He was shirtless in his swimming trunks, standing very close to her. He was clearly looking her over in her bathing suit, and my wife made no effort to divert his gaze. Right away, I walked out and joined them. They both welcomed me, as if nothing was going on, which made me feel a little better. I still didn't like Larry ogling my wife, so I practically dragged him back to the house. Later that night, all of us went out dancing. Again, we had some drinks and we were getting tipsy. Pico finally on the dance floor. I noticed that Larry was gravitating toward my wife. At this point, I was moving past the laughing it off phase. He was constantly around my wife, and it was rubbing me the wrong way. What was even more infuriating about it was that my wife was letting it happen. He would go over to her and put his hands on her waist, and she would lean into him. Did she think it was me? Was she that drunk? I waited until the following morning to ask my wife about it. She laughed it off and told me that I had nothing to worry about. She apparently didn't even remember dancing with Larry. On the third and final day of our vacation, shit hit the fan. We were supposed to stay at the vacation rental for 6 days, but I ended up having to leave early because I walked in on Larry with my wife. We had gone the entire day without any issues, aside from me catching glimpses of Larry, looking at my wife in her bikini. I was happy with what my wife had told me, and I wasn't going to worry about it. But of course, as soon as you let your guard down, you realize that you were right all along. We wanted to throw some stuff on the grill, so I was out back doing that. Cam was with me and helping to skewer some chicken and vegetables. I hadn't even noticed that my wife and Larry were missing. I ran inside to grab some more meat from the fridge, and I heard some shuffling from the laundry room. I paused and listened carefully to what it was. I could hear what was clearly 2 people trying to be quiet while having sex. I opened the door right away and saw my wife pinned against the wall with Larry in front of her. They were in the middle of having sex. They were so into it that they almost didn't even notice me walking in. Moments after I opened the door, Kim walked inside to grab some more vegetables and saw them too. She screamed at Larry and he jumped backward, dropping my wife on the ground. Both of them looked at us like deer in headlights. They never thought we would catch them. I just walked away and went to pack my bags to leave. My wife chased me up to the room and tried to beg me not to leave and to forgive her. She said that he meant nothing. He had just been there at the right time. I had absolutely nothing to say to that. Was the laundry room the right time? I told her to get away from me, and she did. I noticed that her phone was on. Her phone was on the nightstand in the bedroom charging, so I went through it just to see how long it had been going on. It had been going on for weeks from what I could tell. It seems like she and Larry had been messaging each other about how excited they would be to go to the beach house. This was vacation. Larry told my wife that he was more excited to see her in a bathing suit than anything else. At first, my wife replied saying that it was inappropriate, but he then pursued it more. She ended up confessing to him that she had thought he was attractive, and she didn't mind a little secrecy in her life. They met up once before we all went to the beach house and had sex in our kitchen. I found Pam, and I told her about everything I learned through my wife's phone, and she was just as hurt as I was. She and I ended up leaving the beach house together and going back home. To the cruise the entire drive back, we were talking about how angry we were and how we wanted to ruin their lives. They didn't get to cheat on us and just be happy after. When I got married, my mother encouraged me to get a prenuptial agreement. I wasn't the wealthiest person in the world, but I had received an inheritance before I met my wife, and I had a comfortable nest egg. On top of that, I had a good job that paid me well and gave me good benefits. It was enough so my wife didn't have to work. Plus, our agreement clearly stated that if we were to divorce, she would be given a percentage of my assets, with the exception of if we divorced due to her infidelity or her betrayal of our marital vows. Because she cheated, I could leave her without fear of losing a penny. That was the best thing that I could think of to get her where it hurt. She didn't come home until the following day, which made me question if she was just taking advantage of the time she had with Larry. I told her about how we would be getting divorced and how I wanted her out of the house, and she swore that I couldn't do that to her. She told me that she would have rights and that in our divorce she was entitled to half of everything. It almost seemed like she wanted that all along. I questioned if she ever loved me to begin with. I reminded her about our prenuptial agreement, and I watched the indignation in her eyes fade as she realized she was going to be completely screwed. Pam and I both ended up divorcing our spouses. I didn't have to pay a cent to my wife, and I ended up selling the house. Now I'm just trying to pick up the pieces that were left behind in all the mess. I know that there are still some good people out there, but I just have to find them. I can't believe you had to go through all of that. It's heartbreaking to find out that your partner is cheating on you, and it's so much worse when it's with a friend. You are definitely right to be suspicious about Larry's flirting with her. As for anyone to blatantly flirt with a married woman in front of their wife, they clearly don't have any respect for boundaries. The fact that they were stupid enough to continue their affair while all of you guys were at the house is honestly baffling. It doesn't even seem like they were trying to hide what they were doing. I'm glad you were able to come out on top in the divorce. It definitely sounds like she was banking on being favored by the courts. Your mother was smart when she convinced you to sign the prenup. I can't help but wonder if she saw something in your wife that you didn't. I hope that you and Pam can move past this and find new partners that will treat you guys properly. I wish you the best. Now let's move on to our next story. My wife and I met 8 years ago in a bar. She was attractive and single, and so was I. We hit it off, and after that, we pursued a relationship together. She gave me some of the best years of my life. I started a family with her, and I really thought that we were going to grow together. Unfortunately, I found out that she was having an affair with her boss, and because of that, we divorced. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to experience, and I just want to find a way to move on from it. But here's the story anyway. We had just bought a house, and we were undergoing a lot of stress with remodeling and moving. On top of that, both my wife and I were working a lot in our respective careers to try to make our way up the ladder. I work as a copywriter and she is a journalist. She was very close with her boss and all the other employees at the paper she worked for. I know that she saw her boss as sort of a mentor for her when she started. He helped her master writing in her field, and he often gave her special stories to cover that fit her interests. I knew the man well also. He was a widower and my wife had a lot of sympathy for him because she was worried about him being alone all the time. His children had moved out of the house and he lived by himself. At first, I thought that the relationship was harmless. Years had gone by and he was more of a father figure to her than anything else. Just finding out that he was the person that she had been having an affair with was beyond shocking. I started to notice that things were off when she was spending more time in the office. Her job is easily one that she doesn't even have to go in for. She has a home office that she can work from whenever she wants to, but she chooses to go in because it helps her focus, and she enjoys socializing with her coworkers. When she told me that she would have to be staying late, I questioned why she wouldn't just come home and work in the office. Certainly, that was better than staying in an office building by herself. She could have had dinner with her family and then gone right to work. Having it happen one time would have been something to forget about, but when she was staying late in the office 2 or 3 times a week, I had some red flags waving. Normally, I wouldn't assume that she was cheating on me, but I had read a lot of Reddit posts and confessions from people who were being cheated on. I started to worry if maybe that was the case here. I honestly didn't even know where to begin with trying to find out if she was cheating on me. I decided that the best thing to do would be just to observe some of her habits and behaviors, and see if everything was all in my head. The more I watched her, the more I realized there might have been something going on. Another thing that I noticed was how she would tilt her phone away from me when she looked at it. It was odd. That wasn't something she had ever done before that I was aware of. If she wasn't trying to hide anything, I didn't understand why she would tilt it. I was starting to work myself up thinking that she was having an affair, so I decided to take the plunge and hire someone who could dig around. I found a local private investigator who took on the case. After I told him everything I was suspicious about, he decided that the best place to start would be at her work. He waited outside around the end of her workday to see if he could follow her and see where she was going. On the second day that he was working, I got a text message from my wife telling me that she would be staying late in the office. I immediately told the private investigator about that so they would keep a close eye on her building to see where she went if she left. However, she didn't leave the office. When she eventually did, the private investigator followed her to our house. It seemed like she really was staying late at the office. I told the private investigator that I was clearly in the wrong for what I was doing, and I wanted to call them off. They ended up convincing me that there still could have been something going on in the office. I thought it was silly, but I told them that I would pay for another day just to rule that out, and then if they didn't find anything, I would terminate our contract. Sadly, they found something. My wife was yet again staying late in the office, and the private investigator found her in her boss's office performing oral sex on him. He got some pictures and videos of it for me. When he showed me, I was shocked and disturbed, and I felt like the world was falling out from under my feet. I had my suspicions, but I never wanted to confirm them. But part of me had been hoping that hiring the private investigator would just prove that my wife was faithful. Her boss was like a father figure to her, so I couldn't comprehend how they even started an affair. Regardless of my confusion, I was done with her. I had given her everything I possibly could, and she was throwing it back in my face. I felt a lot of pity for myself, but after wallowing in that for a while, I was angry. I wanted to show them that they couldn't both just treat me the way they did without there being consequences. There was a rival newspaper in the area that I remembered my wife always talking about. Her paper and the other were always trying to one-up each other. I had the perfect story for them. Before I sent an article to the rival magazine, I met with the HR manager of the newspaper my wife worked at. I told them about everything that happened and how they were having sex in the office, showing them the evidence. It was a clear violation of their policy, and they assured me that they would both be dealt with. 2 days after I did that, my wife came home in tears, complaining about how she was fired. She didn't tell me what happened. She lied and said that she was laid off due to budget cuts. I was partially surprised that she continued with the lie, but at the same time, she already lied so much. When I knew that she was fired, I sent an email to the newspaper. I got a response saying that they were going to cover the story, but they needed to put a spin on it to make it more marketable. Otherwise, it would have just looked like revenge porn. That the story that they ran with was about a boss sleeping with his worker and getting them both fired. They put the picture I attached in, though they blurred the faces of my wife and her boss. Because my wife worked for the rival paper, we never had that one at home. However, that morning I made a special stop to go and grab the latest issue of the newspaper. I sat right at the kitchen table and opened it up in front of her while I drank my coffee. Right on the back of the paper was the article with a picture of her in her boss's office performing sexual acts on him. She nearly spit out her coffee when she saw it. She yanked it out of my hand and read the article while I sat there with my arms crossed in front of me. She didn't say anything, probably because she didn't think I realized what was on the paper. As she was reading it, I commented on how funny it was that the article mentioned a boss and an employee getting fired the very same day that she was. That clued her into my knowledge about her affair. She tried to explain herself and told me that it was a one-time thing, but I didn't believe her. She was mad that I had the article published. It's hindsight. I do feel like I went a little too far with that. We lived in a small town and everybody saw that article. It wouldn't have taken a lot of brain power to figure out who it was. We ended up getting a divorce. We had a prenup, so thankfully I didn't owe her anything. We sold the house and split everything down the middle. It's just hard to believe that something like this would happen to me. I've been loyal and trustworthy throughout our entire marriage, and I never expected that. I know it's going to take a lot to move on from, but I'm hoping I can heal soon. Oh, Papa, I'm so sorry you had to go through something like that. It's difficult to admit to yourself that there is the possibility your partner is cheating, but you do need to trust your gut in some situations. You definitely did the right thing by hiring a private investigator to do digging for you when you didn't know how. But from the way it sounds, their affair had been going on for quite some time. It's curious to think about how they started their affair, when their relationship was very clearly almost father-daughter-like. It's always so interesting to me when people have affairs in the office they work in and don't expect anybody to ever catch them. In my opinion, that's just karma coming and getting back at you. I hope you're able to heal from this, and you won't let this hold you back in future relationships. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there's a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.